My grandfather passed me the envelope under the table between the mashed potatoes and the dinner rolls. Nobody saw it. Not my father, who was arguing with my uncle about the Giants' offensive line. Not my mother, who was trying to stop Holden from launching peas at the ceiling with his spoon. Not Sloane, who was helping my grandmother clear the plates. The whole family was loud and alive and distracted, the way families are at Saturday dinner when the food is hot and the opinions are hotter, and in the middle of all that noise, my grandfather leaned toward me and pressed a thick envelope into my hand under the tablecloth with fingers that were trembling. Franklin Prescott's fingers did not tremble. This was a man who had worked with his hands for 60 years. He had soldered copper pipes in crawl spaces at 20 below, threaded gas lines in 100-degree attics, rebuilt entire plumbing systems in buildings that should have been condemned. His hands were the steadiest things about. Him. I had never, in 34 years of knowing this man, seen his fingers shake. "Don't open this here," he said. His voice was low, below the noise of the table, below the sound of my uncle saying something unprintable about the quarterback, below the clatter of dishes and the laughter and the ordinary chaos of a Prescott family dinner in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on a Saturday evening in October 2024. "Grandpa, what? Go home. Pack a bag. Pack a—" He leaned closer. His mouth was next to my ear. He smelled like Old Spice and pipe tobacco and the lava soap he'd used every day since 1965. But underneath those familiar smells was something I had never detected on my grandfather before. Sweat. Cold sweat. The kind that comes from fear, not exertion. "They're watching," he said. "You have 24 hours. Then he leaned back, picked up his coffee cup, and took a sip like nothing had happened. He looked at my grandmother and said, "Dorothy, this pot roast could raise the dead." She swatted his arm and told him to stop being dramatic. The table laughed. The dinner continued. And I sat there with an envelope in my lap and my grandfather's words drilling through my skull like a nail gun. "They're watching. You have 24 hours. I looked at his face. He was smiling at my grandmother, complimenting the pie she was bringing to the table, being Frankie Prescott, the 79-year-old retired plumber who told bad jokes and built birdhouses and had never, in anyone's memory, been anything more complicated than exactly what he appeared to be. But his eyes told a different story. When they found mine across the table, just for a second, there was something in them I had never seen. Not sadness, not anger. Something older than both. Something that looked like it had been caged for a very long time and had finally broken loose. He was afraid. My grandfather, who I had never seen flinch at anything, not the diagnosis that took my grandmother's hearing in her left ear, not the recession that nearly killed his business in 2008, not the fall from a ladder in 2015 that broke 3 ribs and put him in the hospital for a week, was afraid. I put the envelope in the inside pocket of my jacket. I finished my pie. I hugged my grandmother, shook my father's hand, kissed my mother, collected Holden from the living room floor where he had fallen asleep on the carpet with the dog, and walked out to my car with Sloane beside me and my grandfather's secret burning against my chest like a coal. The drive from Bridgeport to Ridgefield is about 25 miles, 35 minutes on a good night. That night, it felt like 1,000. "You're quiet," Sloane said. She was sitting in the passenger seat, her hand resting on my thigh the way it always did on the drive home. Sloane Prescott, 32 years old, pediatric physical therapist, the kind of woman who could read a room by the way people held their shoulders. She could definitely read me. "Just tired. You're not tired, you're something else. What did your grandfather say to you?" "When?" "At dinner, when he leaned over. I saw him hand you something." I had married a woman who noticed everything. Most days, that was one of the things I loved about her. Tonight, it was inconvenient. "I'll tell you when we get home. Tell me now. When we get home, Sloane, please." She looked at me for a long time. Then she turned and looked at Holden in the car seat behind us, sleeping with his mouth open, his stuffed bear wedged under his chin. "Okay," she said, "when we get home." We pulled into the driveway of our house on Silver Spring Road in Ridgefield at 7:04 p.m. A Cape Cod that we'd bought in 2020 with an FHA loan and every dollar we'd saved, the combined hope of 2 people in their early 30s who believed that a house with a yard and a good school district was the foundation of a real life. I carried Holden upstairs, laid him in his crib, and stood there for a moment, watching him sleep. 3 years old. 27 pounds. The entire weight of my world compressed into a body that still fit in my arms. He had my mother's nose and Sloane's stubbornness, and a laugh that could fix anything that was broken in my day. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever my grandfather was afraid of, this boy was the reason I needed to understand it. I went downstairs. Sloane was at the kitchen table. 2 glasses of water. The overhead light on, she was sitting the way she sat when she was preparing for a conversation that mattered, straight-backed, hands folded, eyes clear. "Show me," she said. I took the envelope from my jacket, sat across from her, opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, 6 pages, my grandfather's block printing, the same handwriting that had labeled pipe fittings and written out invoices and signed birthday cards with "Love, Grandpa Frankie" for 34 years. A small brass key, the kind used for safety deposit boxes. A USB. Drive, black, no label. And a business card for someone named Agent Renata Marsh, Federal Bureau of Investigation, New Haven Field Office, FBI. I picked up the letter. Sloane leaned forward. I read it out loud because whatever this was, we were in it together. "Wade, if you're reading this, it means I've run out of time to tell you in person what I should have told you years ago, decades ago. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. But right now, sorry doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand what's happening and you move fast." I looked at Sloane. She nodded. "Keep going." In 1968, I was 23 years old. I was working as a plumber's apprentice in Bridgeport, doing a repair job at a social club on State Street. The club was owned by a man named Victor Garibaldi. I didn't know who he was. I was just there to fix a busted water heater. While I was in the basement, I found a room that wasn't supposed to be there, behind a false wall. Inside that room were boxes of cash, ledgers, and documents that even a 23-year-old plumber could recognize as evidence of something illegal. I should have walked away. I didn't. I went back the next day to finish the job, and 2 men in suits were waiting for me. Not Garibaldi's men, federal agents. They had been watching the club for months. They knew I'd seen the room, and they gave me a choice: cooperate or be charged as an accessory to money laundering. I cooperated. I stopped reading, looked at the letter, looked at Sloane. Her face was very still. "Your grandfather was an FBI informant? That's what this says. Frankie, the plumber, the man who builds birdhouses. Keep listening." I continued reading. "For 15 years, from 1968 to 1983, I worked as a confidential informant for the FBI. My handler was an agent named Clive Redmond. I continued my plumbing work as cover. The Garibaldi family used me regularly because I was reliable and quiet, and because plumbers go places. Nobody thinks about basements, utility rooms, behind walls. I saw things, I heard things, and I reported everything to Clive. In 1983, the FBI made its move. 14 members of the Garibaldi organization were arrested. Victor Garibaldi went to federal prison for life. His lieutenants followed. The operation was dismantled. And I was given a commendation I could never show anyone, a small pension supplement I could never explain, and a promise that my identity would remain sealed forever. For 41 years, that promise held. Last month, it broke. I turned the page. A journalist filed a Freedom of Information Act request for documents related to the Garibaldi case. Most of the files were properly redacted, but one batch contained references to a Bridgeport tradesman who had served as the primary informant. The journalist published an article in a true crime magazine. It was a small article. Nobody in our family would have seen it, but the wrong person did. Victor, Garibaldi's son, Dominic, is 58 years old. He served 12 years in federal prison and has been out since 2007. He has spent 17 years trying to identify the informant who destroyed his family. That article gave him the last piece he needed. Clive Redmond, my old handler, still has contacts in the bureau. 3 days ago, he called me. He told me that Dominic Garibaldi Jr. has identified me. He told me that Dominic has sent people to Connecticut. He told me they've been spotted in Bridgeport. Wade, I am 79 years old. I've lived with this secret for 56 years. I am not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for you, for Sloane, for Holden, for your father and mother. These people don't just come for the informant, they come for the family. The key in this envelope opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank on Main Street in Bridgeport. Inside is $385,000 in cash. It's my savings from 55 years of plumbing work, plus the FBI pension, supplement, set aside for exactly this kind of emergency. Take it. Use it to keep your family safe until this is resolved. The USB drive contains digital copies of Clive's original handler reports documenting every meeting, every piece of information I provided. I obtained these from Clive years ago as insurance. If anything happens to me, these reports prove everything. The business card is for Agent Renata Marsh, FBI, New Haven. She handles witness protection referrals. Clive has already contacted her. She's expecting your call. Call her tonight, Wade. Pack a bag. Take Sloan and Holden and go. Don't tell your father. Not yet. I'll handle Garrett. You handle your family. I'm sorry I never told you, son. I'm sorry you're finding out like this, but I didn't become an informant because I was brave. I became one because I had no choice. And I stayed quiet for 56 years because silence was the only thing keeping everyone I love alive. You have 24 hours. Maybe less. Move now. I love you. I've always loved you. And everything I've done, every pipe I've fixed, every birdhouse I've built, every lie I've told about who I am has been to protect this family. Grandpa Frankie. I set the letter on the table. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Upstairs, Holden made a sound in his sleep, the soft murmur of a child rearranging himself in his crib. Sloan picked up the letter, read it again silently, set it down, picked up the FBI business card, turned it over in her fingers, set it down. Call her, Sloan said. It's after 7 on a Saturday. Your grandfather said she's expecting your call. Call her. I picked up my phone, dialed the number on the card. It rang twice. This is Marsh. Agent Marsh, my name is Wade Prescott. I'm Franklin Prescott's grandson. Mr. Prescott, I've been expecting your call. Clive Redmond briefed me 2 days ago. Her voice was controlled, professional, the voice of a woman who dealt with threats for a living and had calibrated her tone to project competence without alarm. How much has your grandfather told you? Everything. The letter, the key, the USB drive. He said we have 24 hours. That's approximately correct. We've been monitoring Dominic Garibaldi Jr.'s movements since the FOIA leak. 2 individuals associated with his organization were observed in the Bridgeport area 48 hours ago. We believe they're conducting surveillance prior to making a move. Surveillance on who? Your grandfather. Possibly your father's residence in Hartford, and possibly you. I looked at Sloan. She was listening, reading my face the way she read her patients' faces. For pain, for fear, for the things people don't say out loud. What do we do? Tonight, stay in your home. Keep the lights normal. Don't pack visibly. If anyone is watching, we don't want to signal that you're aware of the threat. I'm dispatching 2 agents to your area within the hour. They'll set up surveillance on your street. You won't see them, but they'll be there. And tomorrow? Tomorrow morning, my team will come to your door at 700. We'll transport you, your wife, and your son to a secure location. Your grandfather will be moved separately. Your parents will be contacted and briefed. How long? Until we neutralize the threat. We're coordinating with the Organized Crime Unit in New York. Dominic Garibaldi Jr. has been on our radar for years. This gives us the probable cause we needed to move on him. She paused. Mr. Prescott, your grandfather did a very brave thing in 1968. And the fact that he's still protecting his family 56 years later tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man he is. He's a plumber, I said. He fixes things. Yes, he does. I hung up. Sloan was already moving. She went upstairs quietly, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing Holden's things. Diapers, clothes, his stuffed bear, the blanket he couldn't sleep without. She packed with the efficiency of a woman who had decided that fear was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. I called my grandfather. He answered on the first ring. He'd been waiting. You opened it. Yeah, Grandpa, I opened it. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight and texture. The silence of a man who has been carrying a secret for 56 years and has finally set it down. I'm sorry, Wade. Don't be sorry. Tell me the rest. The rest? The parts you couldn't fit in a letter. Tell me who you really are. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the television in his living room, the low murmur of a baseball game. I could hear the house he'd lived in for 43 years settling around him, the same house where I'd learned to ride a bike and catch a baseball and use a level. I was 23, he said. I was a kid. I didn't even have my journeyman's license yet. I was just an apprentice doing a water heater repair at a social club on State Street. The owner, a man named Sal, He was one of Garibaldi's guys. He told me the water heater was in the basement. So I went down, and behind the utility area there was a door that was supposed to be locked. It wasn't. I pushed it open. What did you see? Cash. Boxes and boxes of cash. Ledgers. A desk with a phone and a calendar with dates and names. I didn't know what I was looking at exactly, but I knew it wasn't plumbing supplies. And the FBI? 2 agents were outside when I left. They'd been watching the club for months. They saw me go in, saw me come out looking like I'd seen a ghost. They approached me in the parking lot, showed me their badges, asked me what I saw. I told them. And then one of them, a man named Clive Redmond, he said something I never forgot. He said, "Son, you can walk away right now and pretend you didn't see anything, but those men in that club are hurting people. They're destroying families, and you're in a position to help stop it. So, what do you want to do?" And you said yes. I said yes because Clive made it sound like I had a choice. I'm not sure I did, but I like to think I would have said yes anyway. He paused. I was a plumber, Wade. Nobody looks at a plumber. Nobody listens to a plumber. I was invisible. And that made me perfect. For 15 years. For 15 years. Every time they called me to fix something, I was listening. Every time I was in a basement or a back room or a crawl space, I was watching. I'd go home at night and write down everything I remembered, and once a week I'd meet Clive at a diner on the post road and hand over my notes. Were you ever scared? Every single day. For 15 years. I was scared when I drove to work, and scared when I drove home, and scared when I kissed your grandmother goodnight because I knew that if they ever found out, they wouldn't just come for me, they'd come for her, for your father, for everyone. But you kept going. What else was I going to do? Quit? Walk away and let those people keep destroying lives? I was just a plumber, Wade. I couldn't arrest anyone. I couldn't prosecute anyone. All I could do was fix things. So I fixed what I could, the only way I knew how. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 8:30 on a Saturday night, listening to my 79-year-old grandfather tell me about the secret life he had lived before I was born, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not shock, not anger, not fear, pride. Overwhelming, bone-deep pride for a man I thought I knew, and was only now meeting for the first time. "Grandpa?" "Yeah?" "You're not just a plumber." "Sure I am. I'm just a plumber who noticed things." "You're a hero." He was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "Don't call me that. Heroes do things because they're brave. I did it because I was in the wrong basement at the right time and a man in a suit told me it was the right thing to do. That's what makes it heroic, Grandpa." He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing. I think he was crying, but I can't be sure, because Franklin Prescott had never cried in front of anyone in his life, and he wasn't about to start on the phone. "Take care of that boy," he said finally. "Take care of Sloan. I'll see you on the other side of this. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, kid. Now hang up and pack your bag." I didn't sleep. Sloan didn't either. We sat in the living room with the lights on and the curtains drawn, the suitcases by the front door, Holden's bag packed with enough supplies for a week. The USB drive was in my laptop. I read through it page by page, Clive Redmond's handler reports, typed on a government-issue typewriter in the 1970s and scanned into digital files decades later. Report after report after report. Dates, locations, names, amounts. The systematic documentation of my grandfather's double life, written in the flat, clinical language of federal law enforcement. Source provided information regarding cash delivery to State Street location on November 14, 72. Source observed meeting between V. Garibaldi and unidentified male at Fairfield Avenue Restaurant on March 6, 75. Source reports increased activity at warehouse location consistent with distribution operation. Source, that's what they called him. Not Franklin, not Frankie. Source, a human being reduced to a function, a tool for gathering information, an asset to be managed and protected and eventually filed away when the operation was complete. For 15 years, my grandfather was a source, and nobody knew, not his wife, not his son, not his grandson. He carried it alone, the way he carried everything, quietly, without complaint, with the steady hands of a man who had spent his life fixing things that other people didn't even know were broken. At 2:14 a.m., a car drove slowly past our house. Dark sedan, no lights. I watched from the gap between the curtains, my heart hammering against my ribs. It reached the end of the street, turned, and came back. Passed the house again. Then it was gone. I picked up my phone, texted Agent Marsh. Dark sedan just passed house twice, no plates visible. Her response came in 11 seconds. We see it. We're on it. Stay inside. I stood at that window for another hour. Sloane stood behind me, her hand on my back. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say that the silence wasn't already saying. At 6:47 a.m. Sunday morning, I was making coffee when I heard the car doors. 2 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. Agent Renata Marsh stepped out of the first one. Early 40s, athletic build, wearing a navy blazer and an expression that communicated both authority and reassurance simultaneously. The face of a woman who had done this before and knew how to make terrified people feel less terrified. She knocked on the door. I opened it. Mr. Prescott, we're ready to move. You? Where? A secure location in western Massachusetts. You'll be comfortable. Your grandfather is being transported separately and will join you there. How long? We're moving on Garibaldi within 48 hours. The surveillance your grandfather's letter provided, combined with the recent activity we've documented, gives us probable cause for arrest warrants. Once he's in custody, the threat to your family is neutralized. And if it takes longer? It won't. We've been building this case for years. Your grandfather's original handler reports on that USB drive are the final piece we needed. Dominic Garibaldi Jr. has been operating his construction company as a front for racketeering, extortion, and money laundering. When we move, we're taking down the entire operation. Sloane appeared behind me with Holden on her hip, his stuffed bear dangling from one hand, his eyes still heavy with sleep. Are we going on a trip, Daddy? Yeah, buddy, a little trip. Is Grandpa Frankie coming? He'll meet us there. Good. He said he'd teach me to build a birdhouse. I looked at Sloane. She looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes. There was something else, something I had first seen in her 7 years ago when we met. The look of a woman who had decided that whatever was coming, she would face it standing up. Let's go, she said. We loaded the SUV in 4 minutes. Agent Marsh's team swept the house, collected the USB drive and the envelope contents as evidence, and escorted us out of the driveway. As we pulled away, I looked back at our house. The Cape Cod on Silver Spring Road, the yard where Holden chased fireflies in the summer, the garage where I built furniture on weekends, the life we had constructed piece by piece, the way my grandfather had taught me to construct things, with patience, with care, with the belief that anything worth having is worth building slowly. We would come back. I knew that. But the house looked different now. Everything looked different now. Because the man who had taught me to build things had also taught me, without ever saying a word, that the most important things you build are the ones nobody can see. The safe house was a farmhouse outside Northampton, Massachusetts. White clapboard, red barn, 40 acres of nothing but fields and silence. 2 agents stayed with us around the clock. Sloane made the kitchen feel like ours within an hour. Coffee brewing, Holden's drawings taped to the refrigerator, the stuffed bear positioned on the couch in exactly the spot he preferred. Franklin arrived that afternoon in a separate vehicle. He walked in carrying a small duffel bag and his plumber's toolbox, the same scratched red Craftsman box he'd carried for 60 years. I don't know why he brought it. Maybe because it was the most honest thing he owned. Holden ran to him. Grandpa Frankie, are we at the birdhouse place? Franklin scooped him up with the strength of a man half his age. Not exactly, buddy, but I brought my tools. We'll figure something out. He looked at me over Holden's head. His eyes were tired but clear. The trembling was gone from his hands. The fear was still there, but it had been joined by something else. Relief. The relief of a man who has finally stopped pretending. That evening, after Holden was asleep and Sloane was reading in the bedroom, Franklin and I sat at the kitchen table in the farmhouse. 2 cups of coffee, the overhead light buzzing the way overhead lights do in old houses. Your father knows now, Franklin said. Agent Marsh briefed him and your mother this morning. They're at a separate location. How did Dad take it? About how you'd expect. He's angry, not at the danger, at the secret. 55 years his father lied to him. That's not an easy thing to forgive. Will he forgive you? Eventually. Your father's an accountant. He processes things slowly and accurately. He'll go through every column, every row, and when he's done, he'll balance the books. That's who he is. And Grandma, did she know? Never. Not one word in 51 years of marriage. She died in 2019 without ever knowing that her husband spent 15 years reporting to the FBI from the basements of men who would have killed us both if they'd found out. How did you keep it from her? By being a plumber. Plumbers work odd hours. Plumbers get called out at night. Plumbers go to places that nobody questions. Every time I met Clive, I told Dorothy I had an emergency call. Busted pipe, flooded basement, gas leak. She never doubted it. Why would she? I was a plumber. That's what plumbers do. 15 years of emergency calls. 15 years of lies. He stared into his coffee. That's the part they don't tell you about being an informant. It's not the danger that gets to you, it's the lying. Every morning, looking at the woman you love and knowing that the person she thinks she married doesn't exist. That she's sleeping next to a stranger. That the life she thinks is real is built on a foundation she can't see. But you did the right thing. Maybe. I helped put bad people in prison. I helped shut down an operation that was poisoning neighborhoods and destroying families. But I did it by lying to my own family for 15 years, and then keeping that lie alive for another 41. Is that right? I don't know, Wade. I honestly don't know. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. His skin was thin, papery, mapped with the scars and calluses of 60 years of manual labor. Hands that had fixed 10,000 pipes and built 100 birdhouses and held me as a baby and taught me to hammer a nail straight. It's right, Grandpa. It was always right. He squeezed my hand. Didn't say anything. Some things are said better in silence between two people who love each other. At a kitchen table in a farmhouse at the end of a very long day, the FBI moved on Dominic Garibaldi Jr. 43 hours after we arrived at the safe house. 12 agents, simultaneous raids on his Queens residence and his construction company offices. The two associates who had been conducting surveillance in Bridgeport were arrested at a motel on I-95 near Milford, Connecticut. In their room, agents found photographs of my grandfather's house, my parents' house in Hartford, and my house in Ridgefield. They had addresses, daily schedules, license plate numbers. They were ready to move. They didn't get the chance. Dominic Garibaldi Jr. was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, extortion, and money laundering. The USB drive my grandfather had preserved, Clive Redmond's original handler reports, provided the foundational evidence connecting the current operation to the historical Garibaldi enterprise. 41 years of sealed FBI files, combined with current surveillance data, built a case that Dominic's attorney called overwhelming in his public statement, requesting a plea deal. The plea deal was denied. Dominic went to trial 7 months later, in May 2025. He was convicted on all counts. 22 years federal. He would be 80 when he got out, if he got out at all. The two associates from the Milford Motel each received 12 years. They had been carrying firearms and detailed surveillance materials. The judge called their mission a planned assassination, targeting a civilian family. A civilian family. My family. Holden's family. We went home 11 days after we left. The Cape Cod on Silver Spring Road looked exactly the same. The lawn needed mowing. The mail had piled up. Holden's plastic tricycle was still on the porch where he'd left it. But I was not the same, and I never would be again. 9 months have passed. It's July 2025. Connecticut summer, humid air, green trees, the kind of heat that makes the fireflies come out at dusk and the sprinklers run until midnight. I'm back at Ridgefield High. Back in my shop, classroom, teaching kids to use lathes and table saws and hand planes. Back to the smell of sawdust and the sound of machinery and the particular satisfaction of watching a 16-year-old who has never made anything with their hands suddenly understand that they can. Franklin comes for dinner every Sunday. He drives the 40 minutes from Bridgeport to Ridgefield in his 2004 Ford F-150, the truck that has more miles on it than most commercial aircraft, carrying whatever Dorothy's old recipes he's attempted that week. The man cannot cook to save his life, but he tries, and we eat whatever he brings because that's what family does. He's different now, not better or worse, just lighter. The weight of 56 years of secrecy has been distributed across the family, shared by the people who should have been carrying it all along. My father has come around, slowly, carefully, the way accountants do. He and Franklin had a long conversation in December that lasted 4 hours and ended with both of them sitting in Franklin's garage, not speaking, just being in the same room, which is how Prescott men process difficult emotions. Sloane handles it the way Sloane handles everything, by moving forward. She doesn't dwell. She doesn't revisit. She deals with what's in front of her and trusts that the things behind her will stay where they belong. She told me once, during the Safe House week, that she wasn't afraid. "Why not?" I asked. "Because I know who you are. I know who your grandfather is. And I know that the people trying to hurt us are in prison, and the people protecting us are in this kitchen." She looked at Holden, who was building a tower out of wooden blocks on the farmhouse floor. "That's enough." Holden doesn't remember much of it. He remembers the farmhouse, which he calls the birdhouse place, because Franklin did, in fact, teach him to build a birdhouse during those 11 days. A lopsided, paint-splattered thing that now hangs from the oak tree in our backyard. It will never house a bird. It will never be straight. It is the most beautiful thing I own. Last week, I was in my shop classroom at Ridgefield High. 4th period, junior woodworking. A kid named Marcus was struggling with the lathe. He'd been trying to turn a table leg for 20 minutes and the wood kept catching, and he was getting frustrated the way teenagers get frustrated, loudly, dramatically, with increasing certainty that the universe was personally conspiring against him. I walked over, put my hand on his shoulder. "My grandfather taught me something," I said. "He was a plumber, worked with his hands his whole life. He said the most important thing about working with your hands isn't what you build, it's what you fix. Anybody can build something new. It takes real skill to fix what's broken." Marcus looked at me. "What does that have to do with this stupid lathe?" "The wood caught because you're fighting it. You're trying to force the shape. You want, instead of working with the grain, slow down, feel the wood, let it tell you where it wants to go." He tried again, slower this time. The wood turned smoothly. The shape emerged. A table leg, not perfect, but real, made by his own hands. "That's it," I said. "That's exactly it." He grinned. 16 years old and proud of a table leg. I knew that feeling. I knew it because my grandfather had given it to me in his garage 30 years ago, teaching me that the work matters, that the hands matter, that the quiet, invisible labor of fixing and building and showing up day after day is the most important work there is. Franklin Prescott, plumber, informant, grandfather, the man who fixed things nobody knew were broken. I'm sitting on my porch right now. The birdhouse is swinging slightly in the July breeze. Inside, Holden is building something out of Legos. Sloane is making soup. My phone has a text from Franklin. "Coming Sunday. Made meatloaf. Don't laugh." I won't laugh. I'll eat the meatloaf. I'll watch my grandfather play with my son. I'll sit at the table with the people I love and I'll know something that most people never get to know. That the quiet man at the end of the table, the one with the calloused hands and the bad jokes and the birdhouses that will never be straight, is the bravest person I've ever met. And he's just a plumber. Now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if someone you loved handed you an envelope and said you have 24 hours? Would you open it immediately or wait? Would you trust them without question or demand answers first? And have you ever found out that someone in your family had a secret life, a whole other identity that they kept hidden to protect the people they loved? If you have, you know the feeling. The ground shifts under your feet. Everything you thought was solid turns out to be a surface, and underneath is a depth you never imagined. And when the shock fades, what's left is something extraordinary. The knowledge that someone loved you enough to carry a weight that would have crushed most people, silently, for decades, just so you could live without it. That's what my grandfather did for 56 years, for me, for all of us. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reached you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today, especially someone who has a quiet person in their life, a plumber, a teacher, a janitor, whoever, someone who might be carrying more than anyone knows. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.